Last time I issued a challenge to Christians, some of the biggest apologist channels out there agreed with me.
I would say no. As far as arguments are concerned, God would not be necessary for that.
I would just agree with him.
But they weren't very happy with me.
There's a misunderstanding in almost everything he says. He says.
Maybe we should give it another try. Welcome to Paulogia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians. If you're new to the channel, why not take a second to tap on the subscribe button so that you'll be notified when new science, theology, and news videos come out. In our moments of introspection, all of us have spent some time pondering what-if scenarios. How our life or the world might be different if some small thing had gone one way instead of another. Popular media loves to ponder the what-if. What if someone else had answered the door? What if my daughter became president? What if there is a mirror opposite universe? In fact, this concept is driving a 23-episode Disney Plus series from Marvel, where they will be exploring an alternate version of each of their movies. Like, what if Peggy Carter got the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers, and Captain America was instead Captain Britain? Well, Christians, if you'll indulge me, I'd love to explore a hypothetical scenario with you and get your honest thoughts and feedback. Now, imagine that everything about Jesus' life, ministry, and death was just as we know it. That is, just as laid out in the 4 Orthodox Gospels. And on the third day, he indeed rose from the dead. However, instead of appearing several times to different people, he revealed himself alive to only 2 people, the disciple Peter and to Saul of Tarsus, also known as Paul. Got it? In this scenario, Jesus rose from the dead, but appeared only to Peter and only to Paul. No one else. So my question is, what aspects of the current church and Christian history would have to be different as a result of this small change? Are there any elements of our history that would become entirely impossible in this new scenario? In the New Testament, only one person gives us his name and says he saw risen Jesus, and that's Paul. So, in this scenario, we would have no fewer first-hand accounts. We'd still have exactly one. The handful of non-first-hand resurrection appearance accounts in the Bible would obviously not be completely factually accurate, but would be easily explainable in the context of maybe mixing up story details as the reports are spread verbally from person to person for decades before being written down. Or maybe hyperbolic language, like already found in Matthew, where curtains were torn and other dead were raised. The Bible as we know it would have some exaggerations, but what about the core of Christianity? Leading resurrection scholar Mike Licona laid out the pillars of the case of Christianity earlier this month on a Reason to Believe interview.
There are a number of facts, we say historical facts, that are so strongly evidenced that even a nearly consensus of scholars in the relevant field accept them. Now, I can unpack them, but you've only given me 5 minutes, right?
That's fair.
So that would be things like Jesus' death by crucifixion, that shortly after his death, a number of his disciples had experiences they truly believed were appearances of the risen Jesus to them. And also then you've got the same thing about the skeptic Paul. Paul was a persecutor of the church. He thought Jesus was a false prophet, a failed Messiah, and he had an experience that he was convinced was the risen Jesus to him, and it radically transformed his life from being a persecutor of the church to one of its most able defenders. So, as a historian, you've got to account for those facts.
Obviously, in our what-if scenario, Jesus was crucified, so that covers the first point, and Jesus appeared to Paul, so that covers the third point. In the second point, Mike says a number of his disciples had experiences they believed were appearances. So in our what-if, the number of these actual appearances is 1. As I mentioned, we don't have first-hand claims from anyone other than Paul. So could it be that the one person Peter became expanded to some unknown number more than Peter? Even as the Bible tells it, very, very few of the early Christians actually saw risen Jesus. Virtually everyone was instead convinced by the zeal and testimony of the relatively small few. Second hand, third hand, fourth hand? How small a number could that have been? Did it have to be 500? Could it have been 12? How about just one? Just Peter? If not, why not? What else in the history of Christian church requires more than 2 actual witnesses? Not any early persecution from Rome, not Emperor Constantine's conversion to Christianity. That came from his own personal dreams, not Christianity becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire, and not the rapid growth that happened afterwards. If you're a Christian, please leave a comment on this video. What aspect of current church history becomes impossible if Peter and Paul were the only people that resurrected Jesus actually appeared to? Thank you. I look forward to your thoughts. And why do I bother asking such an obscure question? Well, if it turns out there are no facts in history that become unexplainable by Peter and Paul being the only eyewitnesses of resurrected Jesus, that also means that there aren't any facts of history that become unexplainable by Peter and Paul merely being convinced that they saw risen Jesus. No mass hallucinations are needed, no elaborate conspiracies, no actual appearances. Could the entire history of the Christian religion hinge on just 2 men who were actually mistaken? Let me know your thoughts.